We are back.
We are back.
For a brand new series of At Home With The Hugheses.
Or is it season?
Yes. In fact, we would like you to settle this little dispute.
I'm going to have to... You've got lipstick all over your teeth.
Have I?
Yeah, it's going to put me off.
Go on. Give it a go. Oh, you don't look... You look absolutely disgusted.
Touch your teeth. And that one.
Okay.
There you go. Sorry.
Right. What a way to start the brand new series.
So you think series is...
I think series. This is we were just having a little discussion about it. Tim wants to say season.
Feels younger and edgier.
We see.
Maybe I'm in denial.
No,
I'm
I think
middle-aged.
You are all of those things, but I actually think season is American and series is British.
Okay.
So on that basis, I think it should be series. But we could put it out there, guys.
Well, I'm sure people have got much more interesting things to do.
You never know.
But so
let us know.
Series 2, At Home With The Hugheses. We were really encouraged. We loved the interaction, feedback. I've had lots of people kind of come up to me, and surprising people who I wouldn't have thought would be in any way interested.
Who surprised you?
Well, just younger people listening, and and just really helpful questions. And so we're going to hope over this next series unpack a whole bunch of things. We're going to look at the wounds of leadership.
I thought you'd say the womb then.
No, the wounds of leadership. We're going to look at lids versus limitations. Yeah. How do you know what's a healthy limitation that God wants to work in and through?
Yeah.
What's a lid that's
holding you back? I'm quite proud of that one.
Yeah,
but we'll come back to that.
But today we are going to be looking at basically a catch-up, because it's over a year since we last sat down to do these.
We looked at some of the clips and we looked so relaxed and suntanned because we'd just come off of our holiday. I'd say less tanned and definitely less relaxed, but here we are.
Well, the thing we have come back from, and this is what we actually want to look at a bit today, is from a sabbatical.
True.
Well, I've technically had a sabbatical June, July. No, when was it? May, June, July.
What did we call mine again? Because it wasn't really a full sabbatical, was it? It was a hiatus.
Yeah, you basically took some time out from Gas Street church leadership.
Yeah.
So you kept working for the orchard.
Yeah, did a bit of orchard stuff.
And
also just running our family. You know, we have 5 kids, and so we're in a season where actually for both of us to take sort of a meaningful sabbatical is just not practically possible. Because you can't take a sabbatical from children because you might get into a bit of trouble. But
And just to say, we're aware that obviously for some people in work or stage of life, the opportunity to have a sabbatical is just not possible. Yeah. One of the things, I'm a priest in the Church of England, and it's encouraged every 10 years, you take 3 months off for a period of reflection and space, and it's been amazing.
Yeah.
An incredible gift where we learn so much, and actually God did so much, and so we thought it'd be helpful maybe to look at that, not suggesting everyone goes and takes 3 months off. But I think within the business of life, I think we can work at how do we reflect on where we're at.
Yeah.
Basically, I think in many ways, this episode's about how do you avoid life just kind of taking over and forcing you down a path that isn't necessarily the right path for you to be on.
Because that is a real danger, isn't it? When life gets busy, particularly in leadership, family life, literally, we were just saying, where's this year gone? That time passes so quickly. And if you don't take time out just to reflect, you can end up in ruts or rhythms or patterns that
ruts or rhythms. It'd be nice if you had another
I know, it would be, wouldn't it? I can't think of anything. That just aren't actually where you're meant to be heading. So such an important thing to do,
and
if you can.
And the other thing I sometimes hear people say is you're leading something for us at church, or it could be a charity or a school or whatever it is.
Business, yeah.
And these things become so big and all-consuming that they begin to run
us,
you.
Yeah.
You're somehow at the mercy of this thing that technically you're in oversight of, and so I think this is, again, where space and time to kind of, I don't even know if control is the right word, but claw back perspective. So the way we're going to try and frame it is around the gift of space and time for us, this sabbatical, to look back, to reflect on all that has been.
Yeah.
For us, it's been that's been really helpful, particularly at our stage of life.
Yeah.
I'm 47, you're a little bit younger.
46,
You can say it, great.
Yeah.
I thought you wouldn't want people to know, but yeah, you're 46.
No, why? I'm not ashamed.
Brilliant.
Of my age.
So space of looking back, but then also we're going to, how you engage with the present, what's actually inside of you. And then again, that space that gives you opportunity to dream for the future and reset how things might look in light of some of the things you've learned. So, again, just to say, we had the opportunity to...
we travelled a bit.
I did a bit of the Camino walk.
Can I actually say, one of the highlights or best moments to come out of the sabbatical was you did this amazing walk in Spain, didn't you? The Camino walk. People will know. Some people will know about it. And you can do it over weeks, or you just did like a section of it. And then I did
the final section, the final 110 miles, I think.
And then I came out and joined you for this extra walk that we did sort of from Camino up to Vistera, which was beautiful.
Which they thought was where the world ended, is the edge of Portugal overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, and that's where back in the day Europeans thought the world ended there.
Yeah.
So it's amazing space.
But I arrived day one, and we anticipated that we'd be doing about 20 kilometers a day?
Yes. Well, the actual leg was meant to be something like 25 kilometers, but I thought you coming in, I should just go a bit easy on you.
Go a bit easy. And so let me tell you what happened. So
still not over it, are you?
No, day one, and bearing in mind you're also carrying like a 12 kilo backpack, something like that.
Yeah, all your makeup and hair products.
No, not true. And so Tim was like, we're going to book a taxi to take us a little bit further along the route, just to make the first day a little bit easier, manageable. Anyway, so we jump in this taxi. Neither of us speak any Spanish whatsoever. We point to a little village on the map. And
that's where we went wrong.
You didn't point to the map.
I just gave the name.
Yeah. And again, Tim's Spanish accent probably leaves a little to be desired. Anyway, this guy, taxi driver, drops us off in this tiny little village, no sign of human life whatsoever.
No.
We assume it's the one that you've identified on the map. Turns out it's not.
No.
And so in order to get to the little, B&B that Tim had booked for night one, we had to walk 35 kilometres.
37, actually.
37 kilometres.
And for the first...
20, 25?
Hours, we couldn't even find a space to get water or
no
lunch.
Water, no food.
And we were walking through these tiny little villages.
Well, not even villages, like farmland.
Yeah, exactly. But all these massive dogs.
Terrifying.
I didn't realise quite how scared of dogs you are.
Well, I mean, let's put this into context. These were like huge dogs chained up at the front of these farm driveways.
Who aren't used to seeing human beings.
And literally I thought I was going to get my head torn off at one point. So that was quite an adventure. But all that said, it was really enjoyable.
So did that. I had space to read lots, play golf, go and visit some friends and churches. And then we had a big family vacation.
What's happened to you? Season vacation.
Holiday, in sort of Canada, Vancouver, and California, which is incredible. With all the family, which is, again, we recognise it's an unbelievable gift. Yeah. And I think that's how I'd frame it. It felt like 3 months of just pure gift, just enjoying space, enjoying not having pressure, enjoying not having to make big decisions that impact people, enjoying not have to wade into disagreements and trying to problem solve complex pastoral strategic issues. It was so good.
Almost like taking off like a really heavy coat.
Yes.
That, just for a little while. It was amazing, wasn't it?
I actually couldn't get over how much I enjoyed it. I'm very excited about retirement.
We did miss people, just to be clear. We did miss our church. Didn't we? We did.
Yeah, we did. But
we love our church.
I loved it. Oh, yeah. But what was... So if we start with the kind of looking back, what would you say around that? Because actually, even going into the sabbatical, it'd been a really brutal 18 months.
Yeah.
And I think we'd had to confront a very painful season in our life and our ministry, which had become very public in terms of some very, a lot of brokenness that caused a huge amount of pain personally for us.
That you'd been on the receiving end of.
Yes, and it was just extraordinarily painful. And so that was very present. But it caused you to look back on and question a huge amount around ministry, culture of organizations,
leadership.
Healthy leadership, dealing with the stuff that's going on within, disillusionment. So that was very, very present in our thinking. But what would you say about what you found you reflected upon looking back?
I think, obviously, on one hand, huge gratitude that, we've got to this point in our lives. We've got a really happy marriage. Yeah. We love each other. We get to lead this, for the most part, thriving church, not perfect church, but there's such life and such brilliant people, and God's doing stuff. He's been so faithful. The kids, again, just so grateful for these amazing kids that we get to raise. And so on the one hand, looking back does produce huge amounts of gratitude. Yes. But it also made me realize, a lot has happened in our lives. Yeah. Again, planting a church, moving cities, adopting a little girl, kids growing up, all the challenges that we have navigated, both in terms of the church and in just, day-to-day family life. And I think for me particularly, and this will come on, touching on the sort of the future bit, but I think I realized that I have been spinning so many plates for so long. And I was absolutely shattered. Shattered.
Yeah, you did sleep a lot, didn't you?
I was so tired.
I remember you started watching The Lincoln Lawyer, and I was like, I've already watched that. And you're like, when did you watch that? I said, well, for about a month, every evening, about 8 o'clock, 8:30, you'd be fast asleep on the sofa, and I watched it all then. But that was, that was good in many ways, that you had space to sleep and get in touch with that. Yeah,
exhaustion. That feeling of tiredness, because I think I'm generally somebody, I've got a really positive outlook. I've generally got a lot of energy and capacity, and can just sort of keep going. And I think it's the gift of stopping, that you're like, you get in touch with, I am so tired. And so that was actually really important, and that led to some key decisions about the future, actually. Yeah. What about you?
I think for me, again, masses of gratitude for the things I've been a part of. I think particularly grateful for the friendships in the different contexts where we've served, and those friendships that are still very much life-giving, and now they're so much richer because there's 20, 30 years of history, shared experiences together, good, bad. That was very special. I think my reflections would have been very much around what perhaps I lost of myself at times along the way. Yeah, good. So we have this amazing lady.
It's not good that you lost. So I was just saying, it's good that you reflected on it.
Lost this lady who, incredible woman, sort of helps.
Well, she's a psychotherapist, isn't she?
Yes. I mean, you call it counselling, I call it more leadership coaching.
That's because of your pride, darling. She's a psychotherapist, and she offers us therapy. And if you're too proud to recognize that you need that and I need that, then that's a whole nother podcast episode.
Okay.
But you, darling, you call her your special friend. I don't know, whatever you want to call
director.
her. Let's go with that.
No, but she encouraged me to do this exercise where, and I guess there have been three main churches I've predominantly ministered in. One was Soul Survivor in Watford, one was HTB in London, obviously Gas Street here in Birmingham. And just to reflect on what perhaps I lost of myself in that, recognizing within all those contexts, there was lots of amazing things. But the reality is when you particularly, HTB and Soul Survivor, we were serving under leaders. So you're part of a culture that you have to serve within and honor. And so I think reflecting on there, but actually it was the same at Gas Street because, and this is the weird thing, when you're kind of leading it and yet sometimes some of the things that you thought you'd create more space for didn't happen. So one of the key reflections was, particularly I'd say HTB and Gas Street, creativity, space to create, space to songwrite. I didn't engage with in the way that I would have loved and I think would have been life-giving. At HTB, I think there's perhaps more of an emphasis on training and encouraging other churches and leaders. And obviously we had this amazing thing with Worship Central, which I absolutely loved, resourcing churches. But even within that, I probably, to serve others and train others, spent less time songwriting myself. It was a big church, growing church. Actually, looking back at those real explosive growth.
And you were getting ordained, so there was that was a huge.
And we're having kids.
Yeah,
so
young
those
kids.
So I lost a bunch of space for that. But then Gas Street, in some ways, no one was ever saying you can't songwrite, but I still didn't. And I think again the enormous work of starting up a church, learning a new thing. We'd never led a church before. That's massive. Leading people, setting vision, budget, all of that stuff, strategically figuring out, managing growth. But I think I recognized that I need space to create, to songwrite. And actually that was one of the big takeaways, that moving forward, I really want to create space for that. But there was a reflection and it's easy, isn't it? When you reflect, you blame others. Oh, it's the culture, it's this person, it's this leader, it's this. But then it's fascinating. At Gas Street, there's no one to blame other than myself. I haven't fought for that. I haven't deemed that of value. And I think speaking with this amazing lady, therapist,
your special friend,
it helped me to really reflect on why I haven't. And I think in some ways, maybe a reflection looking back is I almost deemed songwriting and that creativity self-indulgent, that training leaders, being in meetings where you're sort of really navigating the tough things in leadership is somehow more worthy than sitting on your own writing a song. And I think I've had to do a lot of rewiring, that actually there's a call on my life and a gift and an opportunity to write songs that can really bless others, be a resource to others, inspire worship in the church, and is actually, even if the songs never get heard, it's just intrinsic to my wiring.
Yeah. It brings you life. It makes you a better leader.
Part of my God-given design. And so that's been really helpful to really engage with that and reflect on that. And I think my other big reflection was, we're definitely activists.
Yeah.
But I think I recognize, and probably for me even more so than you, I need space. I need space for thinking. I think that more prophetic side of my wiring, that more sensitive side, which at times I've tried to run away from, because again, I've deemed it like, well, great leaders aren't sensitive little petals. They're like strong, dynamic, charismatic, bold. But actually, I am sensitive.
But I wouldn't describe you as a sensitive little petal. Even
no,
that.
I was slightly hamming up for the.
No, but I think what people aren't aware of is that you feel things deeply.
Very much so.
And that carries a cost in leadership.
Oh, huge. And I think that's part of, learning how to live with that.
Because I would say there are two different types of sensitivity. Yeah. There's the kind of sensitivity where you're easily offended. Yeah. Which I think, to be honest, I can sometimes have that. I think I've learned and grown a lot out of that. But I think there's a sensitivity where you feel things really deeply. And they're probably the two go hand in hand.
Yes.
But you're not actually easily offended.
No,
but you do feel things deeply in a way that people just don't get. And I think, again, it works alongside your creativity, because you're a feeler. it then flows into your creativity.
Yeah.
How do you feel about being called a feeler? Uncomfortable?
Yeah, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, because I've definitely got broad shoulders.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
I'm not easily like knocked, but I feel things. So I think that's so all that to say again, I've realised the way I've been set up and the churches I've been involved in, and now the church we lead, I haven't given myself space.
Yeah.
And in not doing so, I think in terms of my gift to the church, my gift is weakened.
Yeah.
Actually, in doing a bit less and having more space, I think it's like that, sharpening the axe. The story of, all those, what do you call people who chop wood?
Wood choppers? I don't know. Foresters?
Yeah, okay. There was a competition and like 10 of them had to chop down as many trees as they could in an hour.
Is there a good point at the end of this? Okay,
and then
good.
9 of them all like going away, chopping like crazy. The one guy spends the first 20 minutes just sharpening his axe.
Oh, clever.
And who wins? Who chops down the most trees?
I'm going to go with the guy that sharpened his axe.
Boom, yes. And obviously his contribution was more effective because he'd taken the space to sharpen. Yeah, that's a really good picture. Thank you. So I feel that actually in giving a bit more space to my week, my diary, my contribution will be, we'll see how that works. Ask the team in a year's time. But again, that gift and that space just to really reflect and look back is brilliant. So
we move into present.
Yeah, but just quickly before, because again, most people aren't going to have 3 months off. How would you say, and even moving forward, like we don't want to wait another 10 years till we do this exercise again, but how could you imagine like just incorporating a bit more reflection in our annual, yearly rhythms, the same thing, rhythms, so that you are being a bit more reflective of the past?
I don't know, Tim. Have you got an answer to that?
No. But
the only thing I was going to say, which kind of leads us into the next bit, which is around the present, I think one of the gifts of that, again, hiatus for me, not full sabbatical, was being able to be much more present to the present, in a sense. So because you're not constantly thinking about all the things that you've got to do or the decisions that you've got to make, there was the gift of just being in the moment, rather than in my head I'm holding. I mean, obviously, again, I'm the family. There's quite a lot of work and decision making involved in running the family in the home, and then obviously, as I said, the orchard was kind of ticking along at that point. But it did afford me a lot more headspace, and I wonder if that's part of the answer to what you're saying. Is I was trying to look up this word. I'm sure I heard Simon Sinek say this at one point. But basically, the iPhone, we're all becoming, really aware that whilst it's a gift on the one hand, it also has brought with it a whole heap of mess and complication and not so great things. And one of the things is we don't have now those spaces in our lives. Say, for example, you're in the queue, you're going to buy your coffee, or you're stood at the bus stop or on the train platform, or...
Just ask, when was the last time you stood at the bus stop?
Yes. I used to take the bus a lot in London, but not so much here. Anyway, those moments in life where you have to wait, you're waiting for something, and I wish I know what they're called. I think they're called white spaces, or anyway, somebody will know. But what happens now is, in those spaces...
Blank spaces,
maybe? Let's go with that. You pick up your phone. And you either do an email, you look at social media, or, you book an appointment. That's what I'm usually doing. Or, quickly do a food shop or whatever, check my to-do list. And so we lose those spaces where... Blank space. Let's go blank spaces. Where your mind can just wander for a minute. And what... The cost of that is, in those spaces, two things happen. Number one, you process perhaps a conversation that you had earlier, or something that happened in the day, and actually psychologically that's really healthy. And again, through the lens of faith, you might just pray in that moment, Lord, I really struggle with that conversation, or God, could you help me with this relationship, or whatever. Or the other thing that happens is you get ideas. So it might be that you're working on a creative project, whether it's a business idea or working on a book, or in my case, it might be writing a talk. And it's in those like blank spaces that you might just get a really good, fresh idea. Think, I'm just going to make notes of that mentally or whatever. And we've lost that. We've lost that because of these wonderful / wretched iPhones that we just fill those spaces with. And I think I reclaimed some of those spaces in sabbatical in the present moment. So you're a bit rude about this, but I started knitting. Yeah. Because I am prone to activism, I find it very hard just to sit and do absolutely nothing.
I didn't know it was possible for someone to get so much pleasure from knitting.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
I don't feel like you should judge that, to be totally honest.
No.
I feel your judgment.
Well, there is a little bit of judgment, but more it was genuinely incredibly
life-giving.
Yeah.
And not because I'm any good at it, but because, Tim, for the record, is shaking his head. But because it meant that I was doing something, but at a very low demand level.
Yeah. You felt like you're still in some ways activating.
Producing something.
Exactly.
Even if it was a slightly rubbish scarf. Yeah.
But it was also
mindless.
Exactly. So you weren't planning a.
And you know the other thing, and actually I learned this when we did that walk, is I think before I would have been inclined to put my headphones in and listen to something worthy, like, ironically, a good podcast, or music even, or even like something as worthy as worship music. Nothing wrong with that. But I deliberately chose not to do that, not to create any more stimulus other than just knit. And I would just, for ages, just allow my mind to wander. And in that space, I would pray, not continually, but then my mind would wander into, again, a conversation I'd had, or reflect on a memory from the past, or I'd think about, again, like chew over like a talk that I knew was coming up that I needed to, stories that I might want to weave it. It was such precious blank space that allowed me to be present to the moment.
No, I think that's brilliant. I think whereas reflecting on the present was recognizing again, perhaps in the business we hadn't invested enough time or allowed ourselves enough time for friendships.
Yeah.
So I think we've definitely come back with a real intention of that more relational aspect of leadership. Again, the danger is because there's such a busyness, things become never intentionally, accidentally, almost a little transactional.
Yeah.
Because again, relational time isn't, the whole point of it isn't productivity, it's communion, it's joy, it's deep connection. And so actually putting in more space for meals, we've got a couple of other couples where we're meeting
regularly,
just doing fun things, taking turns to find fun things to do, and even in the way we're doing meetings, and just more space for that kind of relational connection, to be more present to one another. Well,
again, I think our meetings had become so agenda driven, which is great, and we need agendas, absolutely. But what happened is, if there was any kind of like relational interaction, that was almost seen as a distraction from the agenda. And I think what we recognized is, in a meeting, allowing a little space for the humanity, those little relational moments is as important as ticking things off on the agenda. And so if that means we just need less on the agenda, well, let's do that. And I get there is a tension here, because I know, the operationally minded people in our team were thinking, but there's so much we've got to get done. There's so many decisions we've got to make. Yes, absolutely. But I think it had become at the cost of
and actually what we've tried to do now, incorporating, our executive lead, who's thinking all of that stuff through, space and time into the agenda for that.
Yes.
So you
put it on the list. Yeah.
And I think actually it was an amazing being more present to the kids.
Yeah.
Present to each other.
Amazing.
But do you want to say, because I mean, maybe sort of leaning into
the future.
But I guess that having much more space and presence.
And margin, I'd say.
Margin, yeah, to be with the kids. Actually, you ended up making quite a big call about how this year particularly is looking based on that, engaging with the present.
Yes, I think, again, in recognition of the fact that I just realised I was exhausted and that there were a lot of plates spinning. And I think I've always tried to ensure that I am not taking on anything that God does not want me to take on. Yeah. But equally, I'm not shying away, for whatever reason, from anything that I know God has called me to. I think
this is a massive point here, that busyness, a downside of it, and the rush and pace means you inevitably take on a lot of things
that you aren't yours to carry.
God's never asked you to carry.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we're recognizing that possibly even more important than our yes in this season is our no.
Yeah.
But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, no, I agree. But equally... Yeah, no. But equally, I also don't want to not take something on, because I think that can also be a danger, is that we become so boundaried, so protected, that we say no to everything. Ridiculous. It's like, I don't want that either. I want to make sure that I'm taking on the things that, and trusting my grace is sufficient, that he will give me the grace. Yeah. Because to be honest, if I look at our lives and I tot up what we're carrying and the responsibility, humanly speaking, I just think, gosh, I think it's too much. And yet God has given us a grace. So I think there's a balance in that, is what I would say. And seasons. I know I've talked about this before.
Series?
Oh, no. Actual, like seasons of life, not podcast. Oh, you're being a little facetious, weren't you?
Word of the day.
That actually, for me, and I know we did a whole episode on this, so I'm not going to repeat it, but for me, leadership has looked like different seasons where different things have needed to be prioritized and other things have needed to be dropped. And actually, this is sort of a little spoiler into this lids and limitations. That is something God's really been speaking to me about. So I'm not going to jump into that, but reference that.
Sort of some of the decisions around family.
Exactly, I'm getting there. Don't worry, I'm getting there. And so what I realized is that I'm in a season where our kids need a lot from us. Yeah. And probably parents of older children will tell me that's not going to change. And I appreciate that. But we still have a little one that's not in school full time. Yeah. She does part-time nursery. She's an absolute joy and a delight. And I love being a mum. And I think what I would say is it has been a bit of and I'm speaking as a mother rather than as a parent. You can obviously speak to being a father, so I'm speaking as a mother here. I think there is a tension around the whole "you can do it all" thing that we hear a lot of as women. I would say you can't do it all.
No.
You can't do it all. And this is the lids and limitations thing. This is the seasons thing. And I knew that God had called me to leadership back in those early years of marriage. But I always knew that it would look slightly different to you. And there have been seasons, and I've said this before, where I spent a long time at home raising our little ones, and I have never regretted a day of that. But it has meant that our leadership journey has looked really different. And sometimes that carries a cost in that you have been recognized as the leader much more obviously, much more visibly, and that you've clocked up more mileage of that kind of very obvious church leadership. Although again, I would make the point that raising children prepares you for leadership in a really good and useful way.
Much better, but yeah.
But I think I always knew that God had called me to be a bit of a pioneer, to pave the way as a woman called to church leadership. And in those early years of leading Gas Street, we had to be super intentional with our time in the way that we lead to make it very clear that we were both leading the church, that it wasn't sort of a vicar and vicar's wife scenario. Nothing wrong with that if that's what you're called to, but that's not what we were called to. We were called to lead the church together side by side, mutually, both as co-leaders. Yeah. And because of history, the default in most churches is that it's the guy that leads.
Yeah.
And so we knew that we were coming up against a default. And so we had to make those key decisions. And Tim's looking at the clock. I'm getting there. But I think this is actually a really important point, particularly for a lot of women and mothers. So,
noted.
I feel like we worked so hard in those early days to make it really clear that we were leading together. Yeah. And I think what I realized is that created a slight pressure in me to be at everything. And I think that was important to begin with. But now, I should also say at that point, our kids were all in school because we didn't have our little one. We then, this little Baba joined our family through adoption. And I stepped out for a while, which was right. And then as she got older, I stepped back in. And again, bring back up to speed. We're in sabbatical. She's still preschool, spinning all these plates. And I really sensed the Lord say, I needed to step out for a year of day-to-day church leadership. Still keep running with the orchard, but create space and margin for another year until our little one goes to school, where I've just got more energy and more capacity to pour into the children and to pour into family life. And as soon as I felt that, I was like, oh yes, that's exactly right. And I felt a sense of relief, but at the same time, I also felt like, am I going backwards on all this ground that we have made in terms of being a woman, being a mother called to church leadership? But I actually feel a real sense of peace. And I feel that this is as much part of my leadership journey as anything that I might do visibly or up front. That actually saying, do you know what? No, I'm going to boldly take a year out from that more visible leadership, that more day-to-day leadership, in order to be present to my family is exactly what I need to do. And it's a season. Who knows what September 2025 is going to look like? But for now, that's what I'm doing.
So you're just doing a day a week.
I'm doing a day a week
Tuesday
on Gas Street.
Staff.
I'm doing a day a week on the orchard, and then the rest of the time is kids and family.
Tuesday
morning staff meeting, Sunday church. And then, a day on the orchard, and then the rest of the time, a bit of external stuff, preaching around the place. But
it's definitely, I can see, there's a cost to it for you, absolutely. And that's feeling of missing out. And I certainly feel you not being there in so much the day-to-day, and yet it feels so right.
Yeah.
And for the kids and for the family, and you'll never ever look back and regret that.
Absolutely.
So I think for me
for you, darling. Yes.
I think the big thing I've been looking at in terms of the future and this space, as I said, having 3 months off in your kind of mid-40s, I found I was reading all these books. One of the absolutely amazing, someone recommended, From Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks. Another was Sacred Fire by Ronald Reinhausen. What I realized is effectively they're all books about midlife crises. And it took me a while to kind of clock. But what was really helpful is this idea that actually I've had some amazing opportunities for ministry and excitement and growth and songs connecting and being a part of things that are growing. But the danger is you think that actually leadership and life is always just things growing bigger. That almost like the continuum, the graph just keeps going up and up and up and up. But of course, the reality is life also has to embrace decline and change. And Arthur Brooks talks about these two types of intellect. The idea that in your 20s and 30s, which is probably what I was reflecting more back on, you're often at your peak in terms of ideation, that your intellect, your kind of raw, just ideas, thoughts, initiatives. So a lot of it, particularly in the tech world, they're all in their early 20s, creating podcasts and not podcasts, apps and all sorts of things.
So down with the kids, aren't you?
Down with the kids, yeah. But songwriters, probably often the early years, ideas, businesses. And what happens is then you get to your 40s and you're in the kind of more senior positions in companies or businesses, and you're used to being the kind of golden boy or golden girl.
The rainmaker.
Yeah. But then what happens is other people start coming through and their songs are better and their ideas are more dynamic and their energy seems more, dramatic and inspiring. And so what can happen is you then, I've got to work harder to keep up. And you're basically killing yourself and you're dealing with disappointment and maybe self-loathing and you're struggling and jealousy and what's my place, insecurity. And then you start trying to throw your weight around and you make bad choices and you push people down so that you can...
It's like ego, isn't it, essentially?
All of this stuff just gets nasty and it absolutely destroys you because basically you're trying to prioritize success at all costs. So what Arthur Brooks talks about in this book is this idea that actually there's fluid intelligence, but then there's also crystallized intelligence. And crystallized intelligence is basically when you have the ability through life experience to exercise more wisdom. So you can see, you might not be able to create the ideas, but you can see how they could impact, how they could be best utilized. You can, how things hold together, the sort of placing together of different people or ideas or initiatives.
Almost like you can zoom out and see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the crystallized intelligence tends to increase in your 40s, 50s, 60s. So his point is really, you've got to jump from that fluid intelligence, recognizing that you might not always be the rainmaker, but actually, if you can embrace then this new, more mature, wise, perhaps a slightly slower paced, broader shoulders way of operating, working alongside the younger generation, you're going to find that there's so much more life in it and you're going to be so much more effective. So he says this thing, when you're young, you have all the raw smarts, intelligence, ideation. When you're old, you have wisdom. When you are young, you can generate lots of facts. When you are old, you know what they mean and how to use them. So for me, I feel like that's the position I'm in. Actually, how do I embrace who I am? How do I let go of some of those dreams? How do I choose to not get cynical or jealous of younger generation coming through, but actually have real joy in releasing them, and yet also hold on to the things that God's called me to do? So again, Brooks talks about this idea of actually, as you get a bit older, you need to strip away excess to find what you're really about. Yeah. And he says he talks of the analogies in China, I think, and he's at an art museum, and his guide was showing him around and explaining the pieces of art. And he said, you need to understand that, and these are obviously generalized, but the West often approaches art very differently to the East. In the West, you start with a blank canvas and let's draw a picture, let's add color, let's add paint, texture. You add, but he said in the East, we tend to more
strip away.
Subtract, yeah. The piece of art is there, you just got to strip away to discover it. The classic example is Michelangelo's David, a piece of block of marble, chip away to find the beautiful sculpture of David. And I think that's what I've been doing the last 6 months, seeing what's been in the past, where I felt most alive, recognizing what's got in the way of that, hurts, baggage, bruises, busyness, stripping away at that to find, and I just know the key thing I'm called to is to lead people in worship and prayer in the presence of God, and I do that as a senior church pastor alongside you and the team, but I also do it as a worship leader and I think as a songwriter, and so creating more space for that and stripping away of some of the busyness. So actually I've slightly changed my diary and scheduling to I line manage from 5 people to 1 person. I'm in less meetings. Some of the day-to-day running we've passed on, not because I'm bored of it, don't want to do it, but because actually others can do it really well, better. And I think that stripping away to give me time and space and focus on those things that are unique to me are really important. And actually, in funny ways, to have more space to get alongside that younger generation who think differently, who are just brimming full of ideas. And I don't want to be someone to kind of, hey, you're a threat to me. Like actually the joy of how can I release you, bring all my experiences and wisdom, not trying to shape them to be like me, but to say, I want to stand with you. That really, really excites me. But again, you need to be released to have time to do that, because people are looking for a relational connection, not just a 5 points of what you need to do to be an excellent leader or worship leader or songwriter. So I think that's been helpful for me. I'm aware of the time.
Yeah, I think we should close there. So great. We've made our way through the past, present, and the future.
Yeah. So, but maybe it's a helpful exercise for people to do. Just if you had an afternoon, I think I might try and do this a bit more. Look back on the last year or 3 months or your life.
And you
write down.
A simple question: what have you gained? What have you lost?
So I did this exercise. I mean, you can't see I've got my journal here, but I just
juicy. There's some good stuff in there.
Like here we go. HTB. What did I?
What did you gain? What did you lose?
What did I lose? Looking at
like
the past.
like a bank sheet.
Yeah, and then the present is like, where am I at now? How am I feeling? What's going on? What's filling my mind, my thoughts? How's my health? How's my spiritual? All of these things, friendships, family, work, and then future. How do I ensure I keep in line with the Spirit and doing what God has called me to do? So hope that's helpful.
Brilliant.
Thank you for listening.
There we go. One episode down of the new series.
Aren't you meant to say, like, is there some bell you ring on
YouTube
and share it on?
Who knows? Just, if
you like it, let people know.
Yeah, let us know.
Send in your questions.
Okay, we'd love that.